well done, considering that the report was prepared in view of public administration principles and the new methodology was applied. The process was a bit more difficult compared to 2017, 2021, and 2022. I would like to thank and congratulate all the institutions and those who participated in the development of the report and who submitted information through SIGMA PAR system and who participated in many interviews with SIGMA experts last year. The questions that are asked to BiH institutions are simple, as is the PAR system that is used to collect data. However, sometimes the work on these reports requires additional effort in data collection and classification. During the preparation of SIGMA report, the key problem is the lack of data, and this influences the overall image of our country. In 2024, SIGMA put a lot of effort in additional meetings and consultations in order to obtain the data and include them in the measurement and development of the real image of our country. SIGMA reports are very important to us, and PAR principles constitute guidelines for our country, including other countries in the reform processes. It is an excellent analytical tool for measuring the PAR results in our country and for alignment with principles of European administrations and application of international practices. This is the crucial document for measuring the progress in the EU accession process. The PAR strategic framework from 2018 to 2020 also relied on the PAR principles. SIGMA reports constitute a valuable source of data about our progress against PAR principles, and it's also used to measure the progress achieved in this field. The result presented by Bosnia and Herzegovina and the report indicates that Bosnia and Herzegovina is above average in the Western Balkans. This particularly applies to policy development and coordination. Bosnia scores 32, while the average in the Western Balkans is 46.4. Also, when it comes to digitalisation, it's 46.1 in the Western Balkans, and in Bosnia it's around 23. But on the other hand, there are positive examples, for example, in public procurement. For some indicators, Bosnia achieves values that are, in some cases, even above the Western Balkans average. And also this applies to higher governance levels. Also, when it comes to external audits, the results are good in some segments. That's all from me for now. Thank you for organizing this workshop and for all the participants who participated in the development of this report. I wish a successful meeting today. Thank you.
Start sharing the presentation, please.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kasap. And now we are ready to go through all the assessment, through the whole assessment report and discuss the findings. So just a few words of intro before we go to the first section. Just a few words of introduction from my side. So first of all, I would like to thank you all for your very active participation last year in the process of data collection and then work on the report. As you know, the process that we apply is quite interactive. I would say dialogue process. So we prepare those assessment reports very much in cooperation with you, with the country administration. We base our findings on the data and documents provided by the country. And then we discuss our initial findings, our assessment, our statements. So it's discussed, presented, validated by you. And we value very much your participation last year. Without the active participation of the country administration, it would be not possible. But it's done. The reports are finished, are finalized, are published. You can see them now online. And again, as we all remember, it's not just Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's the process that takes place in the whole region. So in the same time, we are working also on other administrations in the region. And at the end, we publish in the same time all 6 reports for all 6 administrations from the region, using exactly the same methodology, using exactly the same criteria, the same scoring system, and at the end, the reports have the same structure. They cover the same topics. So you can also not only see your progress, your situation, and how you start against the EU criteria, EU standards, but you can also see good or sometimes bad examples from your peers, from your neighbors. Also, you can compare to your neighbors. So next slides, next please. So next please. Some very general comments. So first of all, as we all know, the last year assessment was in a very special, significant moment, because it was the time when the EU decided to open negotiations with Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we were just about to start this process. So this somehow elevates the importance of our work, because as you all know, the European Commission is extensively using SIGMA assessments as a basis for their assessment, for their annual progress report, for planning the negotiations, also for planning the EU assistance. Another aspect that is also somehow important is that our previous report from 21-22 regarding Bosnia was somehow very pessimistic. We found a lot of areas that either lack progress or where progress was very limited. So our current assessment, 24, we were quite happy to be able to identify several significant, positive, important developments in many areas that we cover. So, for example, in the first section, in the strategy for public administration reform, we note the establishment of power management and coordination structures. PFM strategies for all levels have been developed and adopted. We do see and we notice some progress in civil service legislation and practice. We did notice and we positively assessed also some important positive facts, positive developments in public procurement, like adoption of comprehensive amendments to the public procurement law and adoption of a completely new public procurement strategy. However, when we compare Bosnia and Herzegovina to other countries in the region, we can see that in several areas, Bosnia, to put it mildly, is not the best performer in the region. The black dot is Bosnia and Herzegovina. The triangle, green triangle, is the average of the region. So we can see that in many areas, Bosnia is below the average. Bosnia, again, there is still a room for improvement, a room for further developments and forms of legislative and implementation. So next, please. So we will discuss in detail in a moment every sector, and we will discuss the key findings, the key recommendations, but just to summarize the key let's say, systemic weaknesses, the key systemic issues that somehow we do see as overarching, as affecting several, if not all areas are, for example, low level of implementation of new reforms, new legislation, very often due to the lack of political will, political attention, and lack of coordination. A big issue is that let's say the governance, the constitutional setup that leads to fragmented governance complicates cooperation across different administrative levels of governments in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We do see, and again, also as a common issue to all sectors, that there is insufficient financing of public administration reforms, especially insufficient financing from the national budgets. Poor policy coordination and planning that leads to inconsistent and sometimes low quality decision making. Deficiencies in accountability, transparency, missing or not sufficiently good, weak reporting and public engagement. We see a lot of problems in public service management, public service and human resource management, which is very often under political influence, not sufficiently based on merit principles, and then big issues with limited influence of digital technology, digitalization and modernization of public services. And finally, again, despite some progress, some positive developments that again we will discuss in detail, generally poor public management, public financial management, and poor budget discipline. So again, these are some of the key big issues that somehow are common to all sectors and that somehow weaken or even very often undermine the quality of public administration reforms in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Again, we do see a lot of progress. We do see significant positive developments, but somehow those weaknesses, they still persist. So that was, again, a very general introduction to some key overarching issues. And now, next in the agenda is that we will go chapter by chapter through the assessment reports, and the chapters will be presented by SIGMA colleagues who were leading the SIGMA teams responsible for every chapter. And and we will have time also for comments, questions, or discussion at the end of the presentation. So we will start with my colleague from SIGMA, Egle Rimkute, and Egle will discuss the first cluster of our report, which is first two sections, which is the PAR strategy framework and policy development and coordination procedures. So Egle, please take the floor. It's time for you.
Egle, could you please put your presentation in presentation mode so we can see it in the big screen?
It's very interesting because on my screen it is in the presentation mode.
I'm afraid not.
Maybe I will stop sharing and maybe I will switch off the... Let me do it once again.
That's good, thank you.
You can see it now. Okay, perfect. So good morning, colleagues. I will start, as Marian said, from the first pillar or the cluster, which is strategy of public administration reform and public financial management. Or more generally, we call it PAR agenda framework. Is it moving? The slides. For some reason, they are not moving, I think.
You go down to the bottom of the screen where you see the EU flag. If you hover over there, there will be.
Okay, I think it is moving, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, perfect. So I will start from the strategy, and I do trust that this chapter is interesting and relevant for all the participants because all of you participate in the implementation of either PAR strategy or PFM strategies, and all of you are also part of the coordination frameworks. So we assess a number of things under the PAR strategy and PFM strategies. And here is on the screen, you can see the regional overview of where Bosnia stands vis-a-vis the other countries in the region. And as you can see, in the area of strategy, Bosnia is below regional average. Bosnia got 38 points out of 100. Only Albania is behind Bosnia, and the reason for that is that Albania, at the time of the assessment, did not have a public administration reform strategy in place because they were in the process of developing one. In terms of stronger sub-areas and PAR framework, Bosnia has a comprehensive PAR strategy, meaning that, or agenda, meaning that most important areas which are also included under the principles of public administration are covered by the strategic framework. So you can see that Bosnia got 19 points, which is very similar to the other Western Balkan countries. And then another area which is doing pretty well is the monitoring and reporting of the PAR agenda. And this is mainly due to, let's say, reactivated PAR reporting from 2022, and also rather regular, but with some delays, preparation of the reports for implementation of the PFM strategies. Although there are some issues, and I will come back to them a little bit later. The weakest areas in the strategy component are the implementation of the frameworks. You are all aware very well that the implementation rates are very low. Also, PAR coordination structures, although established, but they are not functioning, they are not impactful, and the results are not being seen of this active coordination. Non-governmental organizations are also not involved when developing new frameworks, also when monitoring their implementation. And also, as you can see, only 1 point is for innovation in public administration. So these are the kind of the overview areas and how Bosnia looks in the region. Now, in terms of positive developments, Marian already mentioned that the common platform was established in 2024. There is now not functioning, but there is established PAR coordination board, which is a political body. Also, all supervisory teams are established, but of course, their functioning has to be activated on a regular basis. As I mentioned, PAR strategy and PFM also strategy monitoring reports have been regularized and they have been published since 2024. But of course, for PAR strategy reports, not all of them were adopted by the Council of Ministers and the governments. One other positive thing is the establishment of the IT system for PAR monitoring, which to a large extent facilitates the work of the institutions at all levels because they can submit data in an easier digital format. And it also facilitates the reporting on the implementation of PAR strategy. Regarding the remaining challenges, I would like to mention a couple of them. You may recall that we have different types of criteria, and some of the criteria are related to regulations and laws and establishment of institutions, and the other part is related to implementation and practical results on how these regulations and institutions are performing. So looking at these criteria, we can conclude that for the time being, the PAR and PFM strategies remain formal documents because, as you can see, the documents are in place, the systems are in place, the institutions have responsibilities, and 74% of such criteria have been achieved and implemented. But the practical application of this framework, the practical application of the coordination structures is lagging behind, because only 14% of the criteria related to implementation, related to practice and results are implemented. So this is a very low result for Bosnia, including compared with the other countries in the region. I already mentioned a couple of times that implementation of PAR agenda is also very low. You can see.
Agla,
Yes?
sorry to interrupt you. There seems to be an issue with some people who are not able to hear you. I'm not sure if it's just an issue with certain people, or if it's because maybe if you can slow down talking. I'm not sure if that helps.
Okay, I can try to slow down.
The message in the chat, this is Aida, the interpreter. The message is in the chat is we cannot hear absolutely anything. We just see the video, not the audio.
Are you using your computer audio, or are you using the?
Can interpreters hear me?
I can hear you, yes, but are you using computer audio, or are you using the audio from your earphones?
I'm using computer.
If you're using earphones and computer, you need to choose one.
Fine. It's on Agla's side. It's okay because we can hear her. Some participants they don't.
But I don't know what else to do. We can tell them that we're going. Eventually, could you tell them that we will be recording this and we will send it to them if they have issues afterwards?
But is there a lot of people? Because if there is a lot of people, that's not good.
Okay,
just one person, Egle.
5 or 6 or 7, maybe.
Just one person wrote this, right?
No, so I think it's about 6. Everything is okay.
Okay, let's continue because maybe it's just a few people.
Okay, all right. Just if you could just tell them, the interpreters, that we are recording this and that they can pick it up. We'll be sending it to them, so they will have the opportunity to.
Sorry for this, Agla. Let's continue.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry, I will slow down, but I think it's not because of that, but let's continue. So regarding the implementation of PAR agenda, you can see that for the PAR strategy, although our methodology is, let's say, more strict than that applied for monitoring and reporting in Bosnia by the authorities, because we assess implementation of fully implemented activities, you can see that the implementation rate for the PAR strategy is only 5% for activities. And for the comprehensive public financial management strategy, it's 10% in 2022. So the implementation rate is very low. And I think this also brings us to the other challenges, meaning the coordination structures. As I mentioned, the coordination structures are in place since 2024, beginning of 24. But still, they need to be activated. The supervisory teams and also the coordination board, which is a political body. The PFM strategy coordination is also very weak. I would say it is largely absent. The structures are established at all levels, except at the federation, but they are not meeting regularly. At the state, for the comprehensive PFM strategy, they are meeting, but the composition is rather limited. And still, because of low implementation rate, apparently the structures do not bring tangible results with better implementation. Another aspect which we have noticed, which is quite systematic, it's the PFM strategy reporting and revision of the action plans. It takes place very late in the year. The reports are available only in September or October of the following year, which is already too late to take into account for revision of the action plans for the current year. And the adoption of the revised action plans for PFM strategies at most levels takes place also during the year of implementation. So the action plan for 24, for example, is adopted in September or October 2024. This is not a good practice, and this practice needs to change in order to have a better impact of the monitoring reports. Consultations are also quite weak, especially for PFM strategies. We have not seen the evidence that the revised action plans or that the reports are being consulted with the non-state actors, with the NGOs. Another problem is the funding of the PAR agenda, including PAR strategy and PFM strategies For PAR strategy, only 1% for the previous action plan was funded from the domestic sources. For PFM strategy, we were not able to assess that because the PFM strategies were not well costed, and we could not establish the baseline for the funding levels from the donor funds and from the domestic sources. So hopefully, with the preparation of the new plans for the revised action plan, the funding is already increasing. And for the PFM strategy remains to be seen because the process on preparation of the new strategy started just recently. So in terms of the way forward recommendations, I want to mention a couple of them. Here I have 5 on the slide. Of course, one is the increased funding from domestic sources. It is very important to increase the ownership and also to increase the number of activities which are implemented by the civil servants themselves, not through donor money, because only by doing the administration can enhance their capacities. We know that the revised action plan has an increased domestic funding share, but as I mentioned for the PFM strategy, this is still a task for the future. PAR coordination structures, although they have been established, as I mentioned, they really need to start having an impact, meaning that they have to discuss the actual bottlenecks, they have to discuss the actual implementation of the PAR and PFM strategies. What are the key challenges? What activities are lagging behind? What needs to be done? Can you find solutions? If you cannot find solutions in the supervisory teams, then you need to look for those at the political levels, with the ministers and also with the coordination board. So the coordination structures need to be activated in order to have an impact. Ministry of Finance coordination structures, I would say, need to be reestablished or reviewed because, as I mentioned, they have not been active in the previous period. We haven't seen meetings taking place at different entities and at state level as well. Reporting for the PFM strategy and revision of action plans, if such will be continued in the future, have to change because, as I mentioned, they take place very late in the year and there is very little impact and benefit of these late revisions and late reports. And also the administration, the key stakeholders, they have to review the mechanisms how to involve the non-state actors, the NGOs, in the revision, in the preparation of the planning documents, but also in the monitoring the implementation of PAR planning documents. So these are briefly the recommendations and the key observations regarding strategy chapter. I will now move to policy development and coordination section, and then we will have discussion, some 10-minute discussion on both chapters. So in policy development and coordination area, I think Mr. Kasap mentioned at the very beginning that policy development and coordination area is unfortunately the weakest and the lowest ranking area in the Western Balkans. You can see that the overall score for Bosnia is 32 points out of 100 compared to 46 Western Balkan regional average. So this is really very low scoring and measures need to be taken in order to improve the performance in that area. The best performing areas I can mention are 2. This is the policy coordination at the center of the government. It's basically, you can see that 43 points out of 100 were allocated to Bosnia. So it means that this area is functioning more or less close to regional average. Another area which is also quite good is the regulatory impact assessment, which received 39 points out of 100. The weakest areas are also 2. This is policy implementation, when we assess the implementation of different planning documents at different levels, also inspection and enforcement. And another area which is weak is public consultation. So this is the regional overview. Now you can see here across all the sub-areas in Bosnia, Bosnia is ranking the last compared with the regional countries, except in the area of policy coordination at the center of the government, which is a little bit below regional average, but at least Bosnia is not the last country in that sub-area. If we move to the key challenges which we identified, I would like to start again with this overview of the regulations versus practice. Here you can see that, the results are a bit different from the strategy. 62% of all the criteria related to regulations, related to formal responsibilities have been implemented. And as for implementation and practical application, only 25, only a quarter of such criteria were achieved. So again, there is a lot of space for practical enhancement, but also some of the regulations and rules and probably institutional responsibilities have to be revised in order to improve the results. One of the issues I wanted to mention, and we already had a chance to discuss with the authorities in Bosnia in December last year, is the quality oversight or quality control, as we sometimes call. We have noticed that although sometimes the mandates are formally established, they may not necessarily be sufficient. Sometimes they are absent for some of the aspects, but sometimes when they are established, they are not practiced. They are not applied and practiced very well. They are kind of formally performed without, again, sufficient impact. Regarding the government work planning, we also discussed that with you in January this year, that the government work plans, which we believe should be the main documents to implement the governmental programs, which are drafted as part of the electoral campaign and after the elections, they are very technocratic and usually they are a reflection of the ministerial plans. Also, the institutional setup at the state level for government work plan is fragmented. We know you are discussing the simplification or consolidation of the institutional setup. So hopefully there will be some results and there will be some changes in the near future, but still we identify this as a challenge. Regarding sector strategies, the framework has been put in place in the past years. But looking and assessing the quality of the sector strategies, we still observe some challenges and difficulties. In the first place, it is the alignment between the sector strategies and governmental work plans. The indicators are not present in all strategies, the targets are not necessarily set, and the costing is quite poor. I can note that in Republika Srpska, the costing practices are done quite systematically at the level of the measure, but the other levels have not yet showed consistent result in doing the costing in a comprehensive way. The alignment between the planned and adopted laws deteriorated, meaning that there are quite many laws which are going outside of the government work plan, which basically means that the government, central government work plan is not strong enough, and still many laws are developed outside of the plan, governmental plan. You can see that, for example, in the federation, the rate deteriorated. Only 65% of laws adopted were included in the government work plan, and in the Republika Srpska 46%. At the state level, 63%, and in Bridgko district, we were not able to calculate because of the lack of the government work plans at the time of the assessment. Now looking at the government work plans, as I mentioned, the implementation suffers and the implementation of the government commitments is quite weak. Especially it is weak when it comes to development and adoption of the laws which are planned by the governments during a particular year. Here we looked at the year 2023, and also European integration related laws. They are not developed and they are not approved on time. You can see that only from 7 to 50% of such laws planned at different levels are developed and approved. For the laws which are not necessarily European integration, it's from 4% to, again, around 50% implementation or adherence rate. So the development of the laws as they are planned and the adoption of the laws has to increase. Sector strategy reports are not published, even when the strategy reports are prepared by the administrations. We know that the requirements came into force recently, but still, in cases when the reports are available, they are not publicly available and publicly, let's say, promoted through the ministerial websites. I mentioned regulatory impact is a better performing area compared to the other areas under policy development and coordination, but still some challenges remain, in particular what concerns the quality of regulatory impact reports. Still, we see that quite many reports are very formalistic and they are a little bit like ticking the box exercise with yes or no answers, but the regulatory impact has to tell the story. So we still don't see the story being told about the impacts and why this law or why this option needs to be chosen. Also, very few comprehensive RIAs are done. I think in the last years, we did not find any comprehensive RIA report done in the administrations. And we think that this distinction between short RIAs and comprehensive RIAs does not necessarily function well in Bosnia. The tables of concordance for alignment of the laws with the EU laws are required, but in the Republika Srpska and in Bričko district, they are not submitted for the government's consideration. They are only submitted to the ministries which are responsible for reviewing the quality or alignment of the EU with the EU legislation. There are some challenges, and I would say quite significant, with availability, public availability, and free of charge availability of laws at all levels, except at the state level where these laws are available. So there is a need to make sure that businesses and citizens can access the laws free of charge and publicly. For the consultations, speaking about the consultations, you may remember that this is also one of the weakest performing areas under PDC. They are not comprehensively required. We have discussed with the colleagues from the Republika Srpska about exemptions. We know we probably have different views on that, but we believe that all the laws have to be published for public consultation and there shouldn't be any exemptions for the laws. Also, only in practice, although at most levels required, only 50% of the laws are consulted. You can see at the state level, 57% of laws have been consulted. In the federation, we could not get, I think, the data on the consultation. In the Republika Srpska, around 50% of the laws, and in Bričko district, again, we were not able to get the data for this aspect. So the practical application of requirements has to be enhanced. And of course, here there is a role for the center of government institutions or for the lead institutions to, let's say, enhance the enforcement of these requirements. Also, there is no practice of using diverse public consultation tools at all levels. The most frequently used tool is the written consultation by publishing on the website, but we haven't seen much evidence of having different roundtable discussions with the key stakeholders when developing the laws, having real engagement, hands-on engagement of different stakeholders. And that's why citizen perception, as you can see on the consultations in Bosnia and Herzegovina, is quite low. If you look at the Western Balkans average, it's 32% of the citizens believe that they are being consulted when developing laws. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, you can see that this perception rate is only 18%. And the last thing that I want to mention is the adoption of the laws in the parliament. I think also Bosnia stands out in the region with a very high level of the laws adopted in urgent procedure. You can see that at the state level, all the laws are adopted. In the federation, more than 70%. In the Republika Srpska, 51%. Again, in Bričko district, we were not able to establish, but this is a very high rate of laws adopted very quickly in the parliament without proper deliberations by the MPs. In terms of recommendations, I will quickly run through it because I think I already exhausted my time for presentation. For the planning, we believe there is a need to put in place, finally, the countrywide sector planning framework. We know there are discussions, but we know there are challenges in discussions of how to approach countrywide sector planning in Bosnia. Still, this recommendation remains valid, I think, in all the last and past assessments. The mandate and capacities for quality assurance has to be enhanced, in particular for policy proposals, for sector strategies, and also for enforcing requirements for public consultation. Those three aspects, I think, are very important, and there is a need to look at how to enhance those. Then the publication of planning documents and reports has to be enhanced. This concerns government work plans and also sector strategies. And this concerns, I think, a majority of the levels as well. RIA requirements, based on our assessment, should be reviewed and enhanced at the state level and federation, because I mentioned this short and comprehensive RIA distinction does not really work well. And there is a need to look for meaningful ways and more impactful ways how to make RIA more impactful. In the Republika Srpska, the consultations have to be enhanced. As I mentioned, we believe all laws have to go through public consultation. And also there is a very high level of urgent procedures used in the government adoption procedure, which we believe has to be reduced in the future. Reporting on public consultations has to be improved. In the federation, in the Republika Srpska and Briško district, at the state level, there is an e-consultation portal, and the reports are being uploaded there. So hopefully with introduction of e-consultation tool at the other levels, the reporting might improve. And then access to laws free of charge and public availability of laws has to be ensured. And I know that there are discussions on this at all levels, and there are also activities foreseen in the revised action plan. So hopefully for the next assessment, there will be progress on that aspect. And of course, for the national assemblies, the use of urgent procedures has to be reduced significantly. So I will stop here, and I think I will stop sharing my screen, and I will be happy to respond to any questions or any comments you may have. I understand we have representatives from all levels present in this meeting. I hope everything was clear. We have had a couple of already in Bosnia with colleagues representing policy development and coordination area in December, but also in January this year. So I don't know if you want to ask any questions or have some comments. I don't hear anything. I don't see any hands, but perhaps the colleagues from different levels may want to share if you are already doing anything with respect to our recommendations. I know that you are discussing the countrywide sector strategy framework. You are discussing also with the EU for PAR project the mandates and capacities for quality assurance, for quality control, as well as the publication of the laws and regulations. Would you like to share any views or any plans for implementation of some activities? I don't see the hands. I don't know if everything was clear or whether things unacceptable that I said.
Yes, se izvinjavam.
Sanja?
Ne vidim gdje da
I
podignem
apologize. I
ovako
couldn't.
u chat.
I don't know how to raise my hand, so I would like to say
Pozdravljam
something.
sve prisutni
Good morning,
ispred
everyone.
Generalnog
On
sekretarijata
behalf
Vlade
of the
Republike Srpske,
Secretariat
Sanja
General
Vojnović,
of
načelnica
Republika
Odeljenja
Srpska
za
government,
strateško
my name is
planiranje.
Sanja Vojnović, the head of the
Hvala
Strategic Planning
na
Department. Thank you,
veoma
Egle, for this
konkretnoj
very
prezentaciji koja se
concrete
tiče koordinacije
presentation
politika.
related to policy coordination.
Ja bi samo ovdje postavila jedno
I
pitanje,
have a
odnosno dala
question,
osvrt na ovu drugu
or
vašu
actually a
preporuku, mandati
comment related
kapaciteti
to your
za
second recommendation about the
sadržaj
mandate
predloga
and
politika, jer
capacities
vidimo se
related to the
odnosi
content of
na
policy
sve nivoe
proposals. As far as I
vlasti,
can see, this
odnosno to je
applies to
dakle ta
all levels.
kontrola kvaliteta.
This is related to the quality
Pa ja
control.
se bojim da
I'm
će nam
afraid
ovo i dalje biti
that this will continue to be a problem for us. Because in principle, we don't know how to improve quality control in terms of the content and the very substance of policies. Truth is, we don't have the capacity for this. There is an ongoing PAR project, but I don't see any particular progress there. So I think that maybe SIGMA should help us with this particular part. I don't know about colleagues from the other levels, if they are here, but whenever we talk about quality control and the content of policy proposals, we realize that we don't understand what we are required to do, how we should solve this. Or maybe you can tell us some good examples from the neighboring countries, how they do the quality control. This is maybe the biggest problem when it comes to planning on all levels. That's all.
Thank you, Sanja. I think we discussed this issue, and I do understand that the same questions probably are for the other levels, because I think most of you have shared the same view that quality assurance, I see Andrea is also connecting, and I think this is also relevant for Andrea Merquez from Federation. So this is a very relevant question, and as you rightly pointed, now the EU for PAR project is doing the analysis of the quality assurance. I think for majority of the aspects that I put forward as a recommendation for the content of policy proposals, for the sector strategies, the consultations, also RIA. I think that, I think, but I know that SIGMA is ready to support this work stream. I would suggest that perhaps we wait for the report of the EU for PAR project, and based on the report, we can then see how to carry forward the implementation of recommendations from that report. And SIGMA is ready to step in that area and discuss with you the key aspects and the key issues related to quality assurance. Indeed, I think the quality assurance of the content of policy proposals, here we mean laws, draft laws, regulations, any policies that come forward for adoption by the governments, they need to be reviewed. And in fact, the OECD has recently done the survey of the OECD member countries, and majority, more than 80% of the countries are doing this quality assurance of policy proposals, and they look at a number of aspects, including, for example, if the proposals are in line with the general policy of the government, which has been set in the government, for example, program. If these all laws and regulations are in line with the quality standards for the preparation of laws or regulations or policies. So there are a number of dimensions that are important when checking the quality of the proposals. And I think that maybe we can have discussions after the EU for PAR project delivers the report to see, what are the key challenges for each level and how these issues can be resolved. But I can assure that SIGMA remains ready, because we believe that this particular aspect is very important because the role of the central institutions, the center of government institutions in improving the quality of proposals is very crucial. And it usually helps to improve the policy proposals before they come forward for adoption to the government. So I do accept your comment and your request, and I think we can discuss in the coming months how we can agree on SIGMA support and activities on that particular aspect.
Hvala, Egle, na odgovoru.
Thank you, Egle, for your answer.
Okay.
I see Niyaz has, and Maya also. Niyaz, can you please go ahead?
Dobar dan s moje strane.
Good day to everyone.
Također zahvaljujem se na samom izvještaju.
Thank you for the report.
o samom tom izvještaju nekoliko
We
radionica,
have
tako da
already discussed it on several workshops, so I will not be repeating things. It is quite demanding to apply single methodology to all the countries. Also, we may not agree with some of the findings, but we do accept your report and its content. Thank you to Sanja. I said this at our most recent meeting in Sarajevo, Egle. And Sanja, in fact, echoed what we've discussed. As you've said, 80% of OECD countries do have a form of quality control. What we actually need is to see how that works, how that functions. As Sanja said, we don't know how to build our capacities. We don't know how the quality control is performed in its substantive form. So I join Sanja in this request to you to help us to see how that works. And for the Federation Institute for Development Programming, we really would like to see how that works in some other country. And then we can perhaps come up with a model for our own capacity building in line with our resources. So an illustration of other EU member states models would really be useful. Thank you. That's it from me.
Thank you, Nija's point taken. Maja from Ministry of Finance, Republika Srpska, please go ahead.
Dobar dan svima.
Good day, everyone. Thank you for a very constructive presentation and concise presentation of the findings. I just briefly would like to refer to PFM under our competence. And there was this question whether certain developments happened. So just to briefly to report on PFM, as was the case in the previous period, in PFM in Bosnia and Herzegovina, cooperation is ongoing envisaged under the comprehensive PFM strategy, chapter 3, that's entitled coordination, and it also encompasses reporting. As you know, this area is specific as such because it is under PFM. So its specificity is that it is the only area that has a separate strategic document in our case. We had excellent cooperation that was based fully on the chapter stipulating coordination. So we've had regular meetings. It seems to me that the slide that referred to PFM did not fully present this actual state of affairs on the ground. In the meantime, I was in contact with my colleagues from the Ministry of Finance and Treasury. They can add here additional information, as well as colleagues from the Federation and Brčko district. So my point is that cooperation is fully established. Meetings are held regularly. We had 3 meetings in this year about new strategic framework and its development. We are aware that we need to embark upon that exercise, Republika Srpska and the Federation too, but I will of course talk only about Republika Srpska, but both entities have adopted decisions on the strategies. So that happened in our case in March, and in some other places it was even end of February. So we have agreed on the framework for the development of a comprehensive strategic framework for the period 2026-2030 that will be fully harmonized and uniform for all of us. So the goal would be a uniform goal for all of us, as was the case previously. I'd like to confirm also that there is intensive cooperation between all institutions in charge of PFM, and I repeat that this year we've had already 3 coordination meetings, and a few days ago we had the second PFM dialogue together with the colleagues from the European Commission. The dialogue was assessed as very successful. We also had a PAR special group, and we agreed with the recommendations that need to be implemented in the coming period. The fact is that this was the first comprehensive PFM strategy, and there are lessons learned from it. In developing the new strategic document that we have all started at our respective government level, we have the working group, of course, which is joined. But there is a working group also for the monitoring of the implementation of the comprehensive PFM strategy. This working group in this coming period and in the current composition will continue working on the development of the new strategic document. And as I've said, the relevant activities have been initiated by respective members of the working group. And about the reporting or these delays in the reports on the implementation for the previous years and delays in the action plan development, it's true, it's a fact. The comprehensive PFM strategy in Bosnia and Herzegovina clearly stipulates that the consolidated report shall be submitted only after the colleagues prepare it. This consolidation is done by the Ministry of Finance and Treasury. So all levels of government need to submit their individual reports for consolidation. One level of government has the deadline of September next year. So to take the example of 2024, the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, according to their strategy, submits the report by end of September. So the fact is we cannot have a consolidated document before that deadline because the consolidated document requires all levels of government to submit their individual reports. We did identify this as a lesson learned, so we will try to change the framework for reporting and move it a bit earlier, perhaps the first quarter of the current year. So we are having that in mind, and thank you for underlying the challenges in that process. Same applies to the action plans. The action plans were submitted together with the strategic report, but in Republika Srpska and Brčko district, we did not encounter that problem. When adopting the strategic document, we adopted the action plan for a 5-year period. Therefore, the very adoption of the strategy meant the adoption of the action plan that encompasses the entire duration of the strategic document. But we will have that in mind. Thank you for the recommendations that you have formulated. They will be taken into account in the development of the new strategic document that we have started already, both at individual government levels and under the comprehensive working group in line with Chapter 3 on coordination in the PFM strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Very good to hear some positive developments and that hopefully some of the issues regarding reporting and revision of the action plans, if this practice continues, will be taken into account when developing the new PFM. We do acknowledge that the structures are in place, but what we believe needs to be done is, to change the dynamics of the coordination structures so that they are driving the implementation of the taken commitments. I see we have 2 additional hands, Oliver and Tony. Can you please briefly comment before we move, I think, to Blanca's area? Oliver?
Thank you so much. Greetings to all of you. Egle, thank you for your presentation. And also thank you for your recent presentation when we've, in fact, analyzed the content and we did present the reasons for the results that have been identified. So we will not be talking about this today because we are aware of all of those aspects. But building upon what colleagues said from the Republika Srpska and the Federation, I'd like to say that we do have a common view. We have identified deficiencies In Brčko district specifically, we are aware that in our organizational structure, we have a gap in policy development and coordination because of the concept of Brčko functioning. However, we are willing to connect all the dots and come to a position that when we are developing policies and making decisions on priority matters, we have good links in place and that we impose or assign strict tasks that will lead to genuine implementation. So things that are planned on the strategy, development strategy, other sector strategies, truly need to be reflected in annual and 3-year plans for the work of the institutions. That is the only path that will lead to a higher level of implementation and also to progress of the local community. So I truly see this as guidance for a more serious approach to our activities and our work in all the reform aspects. And I also see this as a step forward that will lead to consistent planning and consistent implementation. We've agreed that the EU for PAR project, I mean, its implementation is not too long in itself, but we have all identified the need to make these steps forward based on the reports that will be developed. And also, we are relying on SIGMA's offer to provide support in this process. So we need good guidance for all of these aspects where we need to make improvement. We need to have a good course of action. Time passes really quickly. The year ends so fast, and the plans also contain certain gaps. For reporting, for instance, many reports for sector strategies are filled with gaps because people do not have time. There are also certain issues in relation to transparent publication. So there is also a lack of human capacities, but really these reform aspects will lead to a good functioning of the entire system. Thank you. I will not take much more time because we have more presentations. Once again, thank you for your support.
Thank you, Oliver. And Tony, maybe very briefly on your side.
Zahvaljujem Europskoj uniji.
Thank you to the European Union, thank you to SIGMA, and thank you to the Coordinator's Office for their support provided in the process of European integration and public administration reform. Thank you also for organizing this meeting today. I briefly wanted to reflect. I agree with all the colleagues and everything that was already said, but I wanted to underline that there are many challenges. And as we have said in the special PAR group, we will need your support and the support of the ongoing project. So in addition to what Sanja and Niaz said about quality control, I'd like to add something about priority 1. You've stated it in your presentation as the first thing. The interpreter lost the speaker. So that we could ask for your support. I'm talking about the establishment of strategic planning at the level of Bosnia and Herzegovina. We've seen that we do encounter difficulties. We've seen this in this EU4PAR project operation, and we do need much more time and much more support in that sense. That's it from me. I was trying to be really brief, but just wanted to say that we do need your support, and that has been expressed in the special PAR group meeting.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you, Tony, Sania, and Maya. I have put down, your comments or your feedback, kind of your requests for support. I think SIGMA will be supporting the quality assurance, the capacity of the lead institutions in the center of the government. We are, let's say, not maybe to a large extent, but maybe to a more limited extent involved in discussing some of the aspects regarding countrywide strategies. But here, the EU4PAR project now takes the leadership. But we will definitely can be involved at certain moments when there is a need to discuss either the options or some key milestones. So we will be following all the developments, and I will come back in the coming months to discuss the support for the quality assurance at all the levels to see how this can be taken further, including based on the EU4PAR project report. So all taken, and I'm sorry with the delay. I'm handing over to Blanca now.
Yes, thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Agla. And yes, SIGMA is active and will be active. Will continue supporting reforms in Bosnia in all areas, including also the next area that we'll be discussing now, which is the public service and human resource management and organization accountability and oversight. And my colleague Blanca Lazaro was leading the SIGMA team to evaluate these areas. We will present the results now.
Thank you very much, Marian. Yes, I will present now the results in this area, which encompasses these 5 principles. We see in this first, Maggie, can you please click the next one? In this chart provides an overview of results for each indicator in this area, and also regarding the regional average. And we see that, unfortunately, results for Bosnia and Herzegovina in PSHRM are far below the regional average, although in the indicator on senior civil service or top public management, the results are slightly above the average, which is good news, and we will see why this result. This next slide shows the results in a more granular way. So we see here that in terms of the amount of scores, average result for Bosnia and Herzegovina is 33%. And this is, of course, below 41% for the region. And this chart shows us that in the indicator regarding the remuneration and working conditions, the results are particularly low, only 25 points out of 100. And this, of course, points to systemic problems and outdated salary systems in all administrations. I'm showing now the results by type of criteria. This first chart shows the results at the regional level for PSHRM, and we see that alignment with the principles is stronger when it comes to legislation, institutions in place, strategies, plans, although the results are rather low, 55%. But when it comes to implementation and results, the gap between what we found in the assessment and the standard set in the principles and assessment methodology is much lower. The result is 33%. If we focus now on Bosnia and Herzegovina, the degree of alignment with the standards is setting the principles is lower in both clusters, both cluster regarding legal, institutional elements, but also especially lower regarding implementation and results. This is still more granular, and here we see that, in fact, the best results correspond to legislation, 53%, while institutional setup is especially weak also in the PSHRM area. Now, let's see in more detail. Well, this before going to strengths and weaknesses. This I choose this chart because when analyzing the problems with implementation or delays with implementation, of course, there are many causes that may impact these results. Some of them are inherent to a situation in public administration. We can talk about resources available, capacities. Others have to do with the situation in the country regarding, for instance, economic situation, need for fiscal adjustments, etc. But there are also some intangible elements that have to do with the social and administrative culture in the country, and we tried to capture to some extent some of these elements in the revised principles and methodology. I showing in this chart one specific element, in more specifically, this shows the civil servants' perceptions of factors influencing public administration career advancement, and we see that as perceived by civil servants, there is an important misalignment between principles of merit and professionalism in civil service as guiding career progression and what is perceived as the reality in public administration. We see here that support from politicians or someone with political links is perceived as very important, significantly more important than in the regional average. Also, support from family, friends, other personal connections is perceived as important, also although slightly below regional average, and as job performance, on the contrary, is perceived as having a lower impact in career advancement. So let's go now to see in more detail the strengths and weaknesses, main ones in the PSHRM area. As positive developments, well, the results above the average in the case of the indicator on top public management correspond mainly to two aspects. Well-defined scope of top public management in all administrations, although there are exceptions at the state level where directors and deputy directors of agencies can be political appointees in some cases without clear grounds. And a second element of these positive results on TPM is the percentage of women in TPM positions in some administrations, specifically in the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is above the OECD average. We will see a chart after. Also, other positive elements: increased coordination among civil service agencies through the Forum of Directors, also increased coordination in the case of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina between the federal level and the cantons in the area of HRM. Some progress with the establishment and development of human resource management information systems and data availability. This progress is mainly based on the adoption of the amendments to the civil service law at the state level that created this system, also the central registry of civil servants as a component of the system, and empowered civil service agency at the state level to manage the system. But also we see increased disclosure of data in some administrations, especially in the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina through the website. Competitive access to civil service is ensured in legislation without any exceptions. We see also, when it comes to recruitment, user-friendly, accessible recruitment portals aligned with international standards on accessibility. This is especially the case in the Republika Srpska and the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Base salaries are linked to the job classification. We will see the shortcomings in this area later. Increased attention to well-being. This topic starts to be in the agenda, although legal provisions on occupational health and safety are not well aligned with EU standards yet. However, we see this increasing concern about well-being, which is shown by the adoption of staff satisfaction surveys at some levels. Also, we see that in legislation, there is good regulation of performance appraisal and also training systems. Well, I chose a couple of charts. This is about the gender balance. We see in TPM positions is good in the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as I mentioned. However, it's much lower in Republika Srpska and especially at the state level. And when it comes to satisfaction expressed by public servants in SIGMA surveys conducted for the assessment, we saw that despite unsatisfaction declared when it comes to salaries or flexible work conditions, the level of satisfaction, general satisfaction with work in public service is high, as it is shown in this chart, for instance, regarding whether civil servants would recommend their organizations as a good place to work. And this is more or less, although with differences, a common trend in the whole region. Now let's have a look at the main challenges. We, in the first place, noted that responsibility for public service policy is not fully clear and explicitly established in legislation. Several institutions at all levels remain not covered by either civil service legislation or specific legislation that shows a good level of alignment with public service principles. So this is the case, for instance, in some regulatory agencies whose staff is subject to labor law that does not guarantee the same standards that civil service legislation. This is also the case of some agencies, for instance, in Republika Srpska, the newly created agency for IT under the government. We see still weak capacities for modern HR management. This negatively affects the fact that comprehensive workforce analysis and planning is not in place. The same applies to, in general, well, HR, more specific HR analysis and monitoring. Attractiveness to civil service is low. This is shown, as we'll see later, by the low numbers of eligible candidates per vacancies in competitions. The selection of first-ranked candidates in competitions is not always respected. For instance, this is not established in legislation in the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And overall, we see still a reliance on traditional selection methods that have, according to the existing research and literature, low validity to predict performance. We mean by that selection is mainly based on knowledge-based examinations, traditional knowledge-based examinations, and in some administrations, these are only of general nature, not well adapted to the positions. Insufficient professionalism of selection panels due to limited specialization and training. Level playing field for candidates with disabilities in recruitment is not yet guaranteed. In fact, legislation does not establish the obligation for public administration to accommodate reasonable accommodation of these procedures for persons with these specific characteristics. Salary systems are outdated, but also salary scales show very low compression ratios, around 1 to 3. This leads to limited possibilities for horizontal and vertical progression. And also, we found that there is still limited political discretion in promotion procedures. Despite performance management and training are well regulated in legislation, in practice, implementation of these procedures show important shortcomings, for instance, shown by the high share of the highest rating results in performance appraisal, and very limited implementation of training funded by the state budget. A couple of charts here showing in this one what I said about issues with the attractiveness of jobs in civil service. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the average number of eligible candidates per vacancies in open competitions was 3.4 in 2023, similar level as in other countries in the region, such as Kosovo and North Macedonia, but much lower than in other countries such as Albania and Serbia. And then also in this chart, we see very negative perception of performance management. In this chart, we see the responses, valid responses of civil servants to SIGMA survey on the consequences of underperformance. And we see that in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and this is also the case in some other countries in the region, the share of civil servants thinking that underperformance simply stay and continue underperforming without any consequences is the highest. Basically, this is it for the findings, and then the recommendations in the PSHRM area start by suggesting or proposing again the need to define more clearly political responsibilities in the area of public service and human resource management, including salary policy. We see this as especially important in the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, when the Institute of Public Administration has very important attributions when it comes to public service policy, including salary policy, while the capacities are really so far limited. Ensure that top public management functions in public administration are not performed by political appointees at all levels, specifically state level. Develop the HRM function in public administration further, including these analytical capacities that should help enhancing HR analysis and monitoring, workforce planning, and the rest of HRM procedures. Enhance performance and interoperability of HRM information systems, enabling also digital HRM procedures that, of course, will have a very positive impact on the quality and availability of data in this area. Analyze attraction challenges and apply modern and valid approaches to recruitment and selection. A very important point, enhance the job classification system. This involves job descriptions, but also review and improve the system for job evaluation and job classification. Introduce competencies. We know that competencies are defined at some levels for some categories. This is the case of the state level for senior positions, but this is still applied in a very not sufficiently systematic way, and in other administrations this is not yet introduced. This is a basic foundation for effective recruitment, but also for career development and for a fair allocation of base salary. So this is really a basic pillar of the system and deserves priority. Also improve these provisions to ensure that the merit order is respected in all cases when it comes to appointment of highest ranked candidates in selection, at least for positions below top management. And then when it comes to salary systems, these are complex reforms, so we were prudent here, and the recommendation was first of all ensure that there is a good analysis, a thorough analysis of the situation regarding the salaries in public service, including internal fairness, external fairness, or competitiveness of these salaries. On this basis, try to approach a comprehensive reform. And this is it for PSHRM. if you agree, I will continue with the results on the organization, accountability and oversight area, and then we hopefully will have a few minutes for questions. These are the principles in this area. However, I will not present results in multi-level governance. It will be another, this will be dealt with separately. And then again, we see here the results, regional results. Unfortunately, in this case, for all indicators, the results are below the regional average and on the lower end of the results distribution. The results are especially lower in the indicator on the organization of public administration and also transparency of public administration. This chart again shows the results in a more granular way. On average, results for Bosnia and Herzegovina are 44 out of 100, below the 56 out of 100 points for the Western Balkans. And as I said, in the indicator on organization of public administration, results are especially low, 30 points out of 100. Also regarding transparency of public administration, 34 points. By cluster, again, we see here, well, that alignment is always stronger, better, both at the regional level, but also in Bosnia and Herzegovina for criteria dealing with legislation, strategy and institutions, lower for implementation and results. But again, this degree of alignment in Bosnia and Herzegovina is lower than in the region. This more granular view shows again that the highest degree of alignment is in legislation, and the lower in this case in practice and implementation. In results is slightly higher, which is due mainly for results in surveys used in this area. If we go now to see quickly positive developments and strengths, first the adoption at the state level of the new law on free access to information, with a broad definition of public information and information requesters, well aligned with international standards. The expansion of the ombudsperson institution mandate with responsibilities of the national preventive mechanism under the protocol to the Convention Against Torture of United Nations. Also enhanced autonomy of the ombudsperson institution regarding the management of its resources, and this was due to amendments to the law on the ombudsperson institution, by which now the proposal, the draft budget proposal of this institution cannot be decreased by the Ministry of Finance without the approval of the relevant committee in the Parliament. There were significant improvements in the responsiveness of public authorities to the ombudsperson institution recommendations. We will see a chart later. Also, the general legal framework for administrative procedures is relatively well harmonized across administrations, with laws on general administrative procedures that enshrine basic principles of good administration. Amendments to the law on general administrative procedure of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina enabled the use of electronic communication during the administrative proceedings. And with this amendment, now this is possible in all administrations. Overall judicial performance in administrative matters has improved. We will see also a chart in this regard. Not yet, Maggie. And then regarding integrity, we saw also positive developments with the adoption of the Bosnia and Herzegovina strategy for the fight against corruption, 2024-2028, after several years without having this policy in place. And then also a strengthened conflict of interest regulations at the state level, although there are now some inconsistencies between this law of interest that concerns mainly political appointees and also senior civil servants. and the provisions on the top managers established in the civil service law at this same level. We see now some charts illustrating the situation. First chart, half of the ombudsperson institution recommendations were implemented in 2023. We see this very positive trend. Now, if we look at the chart below, we see that this implementation rate of the ombudsperson institution recommendation is among the highest in the region. However, when it comes to implementation of the state audit institutions recommendations, the implementation rate is still among the lowest in Bosnia and Herzegovina. If we go to the next slide, this chart illustrates that the length of administrative court procedures in first instance, and second instance in judiciaries with 3 instances, which is not the case in Bosnia and Herzegovina, is low, in Bosnia and Herzegovina compared with other administrations, and is rather good also compared with EU standards. And I have another chart, but later about the situation on administrative procedures. We go now quickly to see what we highlight as the still remaining challenges spotted in the assessment. First of all, no progress on the organizational setup of public administration. A reform was launched in the Visco district without results so far. There has been no progress in other levels. There is still then a lack of fully clear typologies of public bodies. Still poor practice in managing organization of public administration in practice. This was illustrated in this assessment through cases of creation of new agencies in some administrations. Also, we saw that the shortcomings in the steering role of ministries regarding administrative bodies persists. This steering is basically formal, with ministries simply transmitting plans and reports from bodies to the government for approval, but with no real substantial supervision of these plans and reports. Still, excessive centralization of decision making in ministries, which of course negatively affects managerial autonomy and accountability. Regarding access to information, as we pointed out previously, the newly adopted law at the state level brought some improvements. However, the procedures for applying restriction on access to information in this law raises serious concerns about the scope of discretion granted to public authorities. There are no legislative changes adopted at the entities. In Visco district there is a draft law under development, but not adopted yet. There are also still insufficient monitoring and enforcement mechanisms in this area to ensure the right of citizens to information. It is true that the ombudsperson institution plays some role in collecting basic statistics. However, this institution has no enforcement capacities, but can only issue recommendations in this area. Inspections are conducted occasionally only at the state level through the administrative inspection, but this is not a specialized body, and no sanctions are envisaged for administrative silence. Or, for instance, unfounded refusal of access to information. Proactive transparency is still very limited, and there are also some issues at the state level with the role of the appeals council as the second instance appeal body in this area. But let's go to the. No, Maggie, don't move yet. No problem. We mentioned also, despite improvements regarding the responsiveness to the ombudsperson institution recommendations, the response rate is still low, and also regarding ombudsperson institution, 20% of the recommendations remained unanswered in 2023. We saw also limited support, or at least limited evidence of support from parliaments to the ombudsperson institutions and the state audit institutions oversight role. And regarding administrative justice, the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina has not yet adopted legislation ensuring the right to compensation for delays in court cases. So this shortcoming spotted in previous assessments persists. And also another shortcoming in this area regarding the lack of systematic monitoring of administrative procedures functioning and efficiency is still there. There have been no improvements, or at least we did not identify them in the assessment. And when it comes to public service integrity, despite the improvements, positive developments mentioned, in general, integrity rules are still underdeveloped for civil servants, and corruption reporting mechanisms are ineffective. A couple of charts again. These illustrate the citizens' perception of the ability of the oversight institutions to hold the government accountable, and we see that regarding the role of the parliament, these perceptions are particularly low in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It is true also for the region, but the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina is especially critical, I would say. And for the ombudsperson institution, results are also low, both at the regional level and in Bosnia and Herzegovina, lower in this later case. This is another chart I wanted to show regarding judicial performance in administrative justice. And we see that the situation is uneven in the different administrations in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We see a rather positive situation regarding the clearance rate, so the ability of administrative courts to resolve, to manage the inflow of cases and resolve cases. So if this indicator is above 100, is a good signal, and this is the case in all administrations. However, when it comes to this disposition time, or the length of the duration of the overall length of these procedures, this indicator is still high, especially in the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the state level. This chart is also important, illustrates declared experiences with bribery of citizens in SIGMA survey conducted for the assessment, and we see that 14% of respondents, valid responses to the question of whether they had been exposed to a situation in which they had to pay any gift or money to a public official in the last 12 months. The 14% of respondents said yes. In the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, this is the second highest share in the region, only after Albania. If we go to the next one. This is also showing shortcoming in the integrity area as perceived by citizens, which is the difficulties they find to report corruption. And we see that only 21% of respondents in the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina declared that they found very easy or somewhat easy to report corruption cases. The share of respondents is higher for the region, but is also very low on average. And this was our view about main positive developments and shortcomings. And now when it comes to recommendations, very quickly, First, ensure consistent organization, accountability, and governance rules for public administration bodies. Foster managerial accountability in ministries by empowering senior civil servants. Align legislation on the rights to access information with international standards at all levels. Strengthen parliamentary mechanisms to enhance responsiveness to the Ombudsperson institution and state audit recommendations. And also, of course, improve responsiveness, the responsiveness, the share of answers to these recommendations. Implement systematic monitoring of administrative procedures followed with corrective measures. Improve legislation on conflict of interest, asset declaration, whistleblowing in public service, and ensure clear responsibilities and effective enforcement, because these structures to ensure this implementation and enforcement in the integrity area are missing. And well, we included also this point of regulation of lobbying activities that I mentioned before, but this is a fact that this is not yet regulated in any administration. That was all on my side. I don't know whether my colleague Imoligi, who was in fact in charge of administrative procedures and administrative justice, considered that I reflected correctly the main shortcomings and positive developments, or he would like to add something, or otherwise maybe participants would like to raise some questions.
We are running a bit late. We are behind our plan, our agenda, but if there are some comments or questions for requests for clarification from the audience, we would be happy to answer. Can we see the list of participants to see if anybody is raising their hand?
No, sorry.
So I don't seem to see any hands raised. But again, the same as in case of Egle, we are in constant contact with you. Blanca is working in Bosnia and Herzegovina a lot, so we are in permanent dialogue. So I understand there have been already, and there will be many opportunities to discuss further those issues. So having said that, I would be happy to ask my colleague Nick Tace to continue and to present service delivery and digitalization topic.
Thank you, dear Marian, and dobro jutro, dobar dan to all colleagues online. Great to see you in so big numbers. When waiting for my colleague Maggie to set up the presentation, it's a pleasure to briefly talk you through the assessment that we carried out indeed on the area of service delivery and digital. Has already been introduced and by the PAR coordinator, but also by Marian in the general overview. The area of service delivery and digital, compared to the other areas that SIGMA has been looking at, it's not scoring very positive in this time. Also compared to the region, as you can see also here, the score isn't the best. On one hand, this is due to the lack of data and information that is available and that we received, clearly. So we have to acknowledge that. On the other hand, in the areas where we did receive information and data, also there the results were not always very positive. Having this said, let's zoom in into the details. And these are the details. These are the 4 different principles in our area of service delivery and digital that we are taking and that we took and are taking into account. On the one hand, we're looking into the background, the enablers, the systems, the policies, the strategies for being able to design and deliver administrative services. Then we're also looking into the delivery of high quality services itself, principle 20. Accessibility, we zoom in particular, and then finally a dedicated principle related to digital. What we have noticed, and this is not only for Bosnia and Herzegovina, but this is in all the countries, that when we're looking towards enablers, delivery and accessibility, we see quite a pattern. that the enablers, they score in all countries except Albania, as you can see, in all countries, they score the lowest. So really the foundations, the fundamentals, the backbone, in order to later on deliver high quality services, this seems to be weak in all. Accessibility, on the other hand, this is high in all of the countries. I will zoom into this a bit later. When coming to the different aspects, so the different principles one by one, what are then the major findings that we came across in Bosnia and Herzegovina? When it comes to this backbone, first of all, we can see that in the overall area of service delivery, little progress has been made over the recent years. Certainly compared to the last time when we did the assessment, very, very little progress has been made. This is largely due to policy and political leadership, clear, but also to a lack of clear roles and responsibility identification. We'll come back to this later on also when talking about digital, but in the general area of service delivery policy and improvement, the real division and not clarity of roles and responsibilities across the board. This is striking, and this is really preventing at all the different levels and layers across the country to make a sustainable progress. However, we must say that in the action plan and the public administration reform strategy and the action plan going with this, everything has been defined. All the points, all the areas, all the actions that should be undertaken, they have been put there. As colleague Ekle already pointed out, when it comes to the implementation, there we see a big manko. And this is in general, but this is also the case when it comes to the area of service delivery and digital. So the actions as planned, as said, good ones, but as planned, they largely remain unimplemented. So on paper. When it comes to administrative simplification, there we see a very piecemeal approach. There is no coordination, even within the different entity levels. There is no, well, or hardly any coordinated, consolidated approach, which makes that if already simplification efforts happen, this is really on its own behalf of the different agencies, ministries, institutions. Not saying that no good things happen, but really there could be a big gain of a coordinated approach, consolidated approach in tackling administrative simplification. In the use of instruments of user engagement, tools, instrument approaches, but also setting service standards, monitoring quality of service, there the results are, in all honesty, colleagues and friends, are quite weak. So there a lot of progress still can be made. When going into the second principle, so when it comes to the delivery of services, there we see a lack of central portals providing information and access to online services. And certainly when it comes to like integrating of services into clusters, live events, as we call them these days, this is not happening despite one exception, the eBaby service that was installed and happening in the Republika Srpska. Of course, to make such an integrated approach work, the once only and interoperability needs to be up and running and fully functioning. We see that once only is in the legislation, but when it comes to the implementation and the really functionality, interoperability of registers over the available infrastructure, so the GSB is very limited, So the installment of the supervisory board coordinating the interoperability is really a must, as you have noticed, and this is up and running. Yet, still, it seems that this supervisory body lacks really the infrastructure and the resources to make it really fully up and running and working. So also there, some investment and progress can be made. Yes, Becky. Finally, then, when it comes to the principle on accessibility, again, as we have noticed in all the countries, and also including in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there are some good results or positive results noted, definitely when it comes to the physical channels, so over-the-counter services provided. Their results are quite positive. But when it comes to the online digital services, there the results are, on the contrary, not so positive. Also, when it comes to people with special needs, there is no plan or no updated plan, no recent plans that are there. So this is also shown into the results of offering services to people with special needs. Republika Srpska, they have a plan, so there we see some positive developments. We also asked some opinion polls, the general public, but also businesses. There you can see that where citizens and also businesses, so the left and the right, are somewhat satisfied. In both cases, 55% are below the regional average, which is also not super high. Okay. Next, and you can click through, Maggie. Okay, no time to. Sorry. Yes. Zooming in then to slowly come to an end. Zooming in on the specific area of digital, although that it's mentioned as well a key topic on all reform agendas, well, including in Bosnia and Herzegovina, there the current results against, and you can see the detailed sub principles and indicators here. The detailed results for Bosnia and Herzegovina show quite, well, I would say grim, but as you can see here, quite red, meaning there is a lot of progress still to be made, dear colleagues. In detail, again here, some clear identification of responsibilities and also coordination, clear mandates, allocation of resources is really needed. In that sense, the creation of the agency in Republika Srpska on information and communication technologies is a good thing. We really would like to see and encourage that the same kind of efforts would also happen on the other levels. Positive to note is that despite an overarching legislation, the cloud-based e-signature technical solution has been launched by IDEA recently. It seems to work. As noted before, a clear sharing of data ownership across registries, there is a lot of progress still to be made. Also in the area of GDPR and data protection, the personal data protection law on the level of BiH is in place. Harmonization with GDPR still needs to happen. Also, when it comes to cybersecurity, at the time of the assessment, the regulation was under development, but strategies are not yet up and running and in place. And also when it comes to the CERT, so the Computer Emergency Response Team, this has not been established. And in these days, dear colleagues, this is something that cannot lack our further attention and action. Yes, Maggie. Yes, and next one. No. To conclude, some areas to point for the way forward. No surprise, I think, that we recommend, again, also we did this last times, really to work on a clearly assignment of the responsibilities for the service delivery policy. Service delivery units, even thinking about an overarching chief information officer. We know it's not easy in the current institutional organizational setup, but really there needs to be some good reflection on how to coordinate, streamline the responsibilities, the coordination, really to make some progress. As said in the PAR strategy and the action plan, the actions have been identified, everything is there, but like a good, comprehensive, coherent strategy, like integrating simplification, the redesign of services, linking it to user engagement, service standards. So really the sequence of the actions, this is where some progress can be made. The use of, and probably enforced use of the GSB to allow and use really the data exchange between the registries of government institutions. This is really something that also is highly recommended. The creation of service catalogs to also think about a multi-channel accessibility strategy, not only the physical one, but also invest in the online, and then also not to lose sight of the people with special needs, so that they are becoming fully integrated, not only in the strategies, but also in the service delivery at the end. So far, for the area of service delivery and digital, happy to discuss now, but we are also in contact with the different colleagues in the country. So happy to take questions and discussions now, but otherwise happy to also follow up in the country now and later. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you, Nick, very much. So yes, please do, if you have questions or comments, raise your electronic hand and show us that you are willing to talk. Or if not, because again, we are a bit behind the schedule, we can, I don't see anyone wishing to pose a question. So I understand we are ready. Thank you very much, Nick, again. And I understand we are ready for the next section, public financial management. And here we will have two presentations. First with my SIGMA colleague, Alistair Swarbrick, who was leading the PFM section in the assessment. And I will finish the presentations today to talk about public procurement. So please, Alistair, take the floor.
Thank you, Marian, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. Could we go to the first slide, please, Maggie?
Please, yes. Hold on, sorry. This one, yes, you told me to do it.
Okay, looking at the overall results, indicator results for PFM, I'm going to focus on the 6 indicators that I was responsible for. But just to mention first that you'll see in previous slides that public financial management as an overall area in terms of indicator values is performing better than all the other 5 areas in Bosnia and Herzegovina, although it is still at the bottom end of the regional range. But looking at the 6 indicators I'm looking at in terms around budgeting, internal control and internal audit and external audit, we can see that in terms of the indicator values for internal audit and external audit are the best performing. Internal audit is in line with the regional average, and external audit is doing well in absolute terms, despite being at the lower end of the regional values. However, when we come to look at the indicators around budget planning and budget implementation and reporting, these are both low in terms of absolute terms and also compared to at the bottom end compared to the region. Whereas with budget execution, we're seeing it's in the mid-range, reasonable performance, and also in the mid-range of the region. However, the biggest challenges that the indicators show seem to be around internal control, with the indicator having the lowest indicator value for PFM overall, and this is actually consistent with previous assessments as well, where we've seen the challenges of internal control. Next slide, please, Maggie. Looking at the state of play in public financial management by types of criterion, much the same as we've seen for the other areas, we see that for those criteria around legislation, strategy, and the organization of institutions, that there's much better performance than compared to the criteria related to the implementation of policies, etc., and the results and impact of the work in PFM and the criteria. So can you skip this one, please, Maggie? So looking first, I'm going to look at this in 3 areas. We're going to look at budget management, and then PIFC, and then external audit. Looking at some of the positive developments, the budget planning framework is sound. It includes medium-term fiscal frameworks, and steps have been taken to enhance the coverage of the budget since 2021. We see that the payment and commitment controls at a central government level are sound and appear sound. There have been developments to improve the relevant legal framework and arrangements for managing public investments. Steps have been taken to develop the assessment of fiscal risks, and debt management structures are in place, and overall debt and deficit levels are well within the European Union benchmarks that we'd expect to see. However, there are some remaining and emerging challenges. Challenges still exist in approving budget planning documents in line with the budget calendar, undermining budget discipline and the time available for parliamentary scrutiny. There are issues around linking of strategic planning and policy priorities to the budget processes being weak, and deviations between budget plans and outturns indicate that there is potential improvement in budget credibility that could be made. Additionally, there are a high number of first-level budget organizations across Bosnia and Herzegovina. We see that parliamentary scrutiny of in-year budget execution and annual financial statements continues to be limited. With respect to fiscal risks, we see that steps have been taken to develop assessment of fiscal risks, but more work is still required around their monitoring and reporting. For large capital investment decisions, independent and transparent appraisal of costs and benefits needs further development. And with the exception of the Republika Srpska, fiscal rules and an independent fiscal council have not been established across Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now I'm going to have a look at a couple of these aspects in a bit more detail. If we look at the organizational structure of budget management in terms of the number of first-level budget users, we see across the region that there are very high levels of first-level budget users, and you can see here in the Federation and Republika Srpska there are high levels. And this is in particular in comparison to the EU average, which is below 20. And what is the reality of this? From our perspective, high levels of first-level budget users, organizations, impacts the efficiency of the budgeting process, creating a heavy workload on the Ministry of Finance as it takes time away from them, focusing on its more strategic role in terms of medium-term budget processes, and also dilutes the line responsibility of the various ministries for the results of government policies as institutions negotiate their budgets directly with the Ministry of Finance. Next slide, please. In terms of budget credibility, we see that in terms of the actual expenditure outturns compared to the original budgets, there are significant deviations at the aggregate and disaggregate level, both in Bosnia and across the region, which undermines potentially the credibility of the budgets. Next slide, please. But on a positive note, this shows the development in Bosnia and Herzegovina compared to the Western Balkans and the EU 27. And we can see here that Bosnia is below the Western Balkan countries in terms of level of debt and well below the EU 27 in that rate. So that's a positive perspective. Now moving on to public internal financial control. Excuse me. Very much similar to previously, we see that the regulatory and operational framework for internal control and internal audit are well established in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and comprehensive laws and guidelines are across all 4 administrations. There's effective coordination of the implementation of internal control and internal audit by CHUs, and there are strategies in place to guide the further development of internal financial control. And also there has been positive developments around risk management, actually. But overall, we see that the practical implementation of internal control varies significantly, with inconsistencies in policy application, risk management, and adherence to guidelines across budget institutions. And additionally, there are gaps in compliance with and transparency and managerial accountability, as my colleague Blanca mentioned earlier, and reporting on internal control and state-owned enterprises. It's clear that the Federation and the Republika Srpska face greater implementation challenges due to the number of institutions required to implement internal control systems. And there are challenges then in that regard in managing and monitoring their progress. With respect to internal audit units, they still face challenges. Back again, please, Maggie, too quick.
Sorry.
With respect to internal audit units, they face challenges in the levels of staffing, and the implementation rate of internal audit recommendations remains low, obviously having a limiting their impact of the internal audit units. And at the moment, internal audit unit is not effectively established in Brčko district. And ultimately, internal audit quality assurance needs to be strengthened across BiH, including the conducting of internal and external assessments to ensure methodological consistency. Next slide, please. Here we see, to further look at the capacity of internal audit, in terms of coverage of internal audit of across the government entities and then the staffing. We see that in Bosnia and Herzegovina, 87% of central government entities have internal audit established, which is positive compared to the region. But in terms of the internal audit staffed according to legal requirements and having at least 2 internal auditors, they only see that in 50% of the relevant internal audit units, highlighting there's still an issue around the capacity of internal audit to deliver effective assurance services and meet the requirements of the standards as expected. And although it's said overall it's better than the region, it's still fairly low in terms of the number of staffing of the internal audit. Next slide, please. And in terms of implementation rate of audit recommendations, 49% is the current rate, which is less than the regional average, and is still, it's not the worst, but it's still an area where improvement is required in that regard. Okay. Now moving on to external audit. What we see is that generally the individual audit officers have a sound legal and operational frameworks which establish their independence, mandate, and organization. And the audit officers conduct their audits in accordance with the international standards, including for performance audits. They have established processes for reporting and following up in audits and monitoring the implementation of recommendations and findings. And in recent years, they have made improvements in their strategic planning and communication systems, with the officers trying to actively engage with civil society, NGOs, to communicate about their role in their work. However, we still have some remaining and emerging challenges there in the size as well. The ongoing issue around the constitutional position of the size is still an issue. The coverage in Federation and Republic of Srpska, while we have seen improvements, there's a question mark whether further should be required there. In terms of the impact of the audit officers' works, the implementation rate of recommendations remains low in this regard. And we still have challenges with the use of side reports by parliamentary committees to scrutinize the executive. This is very inconsistent across the administrations with limited follow-up mechanisms in some cases. This shows you the number of audits conducted by the audit officers in 2023. And in terms of the Federation and Republic of Srpska, particularly around the financial audits, we've seen a sort of increase of 10 to 20% over the last 3 or 4 years in the number they conduct. And we've seen consistent performance around performance audits and conducting that across the piece. So that's a positive message in that regard. Next, but here we have the implementation rate of audit office recommendations. Again, we see that Bosnia and Herzegovina falls below the regional average, and there is obviously room for improvement in terms of moving this forward across the piece. So, looking at the way forward. So, in terms of budget management, in terms of fiscal discipline, ensuring that the regulatory framework for the preparation of the medium and annual budgets are complied with as a starting point, meeting the budget calendars. Introduce fiscal rules and government debt and deficit limits across the BiH and establish independent fiscal monitoring bodies. As we've said previously, improve fiscal and budgetary strategic documents by linking policy decisions more effectively with medium-term budget ceilings for budget organizations, and look at reducing the number of first-level budget organizations. Continue to develop and strengthen the practices for the assessment, management, and monitoring of fiscal risks. Look at integrating decision-making and monitoring investments fully into the budget process, and continue to improve and enhance the regulations and the capacity to manage publicly managed investments. With respect to internal financial control, the administration should effectively look to implement managerial accountability and internal control reporting across all entities, organizations. This should include establishing clear reporting lines, delegating authority effectively, and ensuring that all ministries and subordinate bodies submit annual plans and activity reports. The CHU should ensure that robust internal audit quality assurance systems are developed and implemented across the Bosnia and Herzegovina, aligned with international standards, which should include regular internal and external assessments to ensure the effectiveness and credibility of internal audit processes. We should look at the organizational capacity and coverage of internal audit to ensure that it can deliver effective assurance services, as it should do. And in terms of Brčko district, it should actually establish an operational internal audit unit. Finally, with respect to external audit, at the state level, there should be further engagement in terms of the competence of an authority to conduct audits of a number of small bodies and also the audit of the indirect taxes collected by the ITA. The Supreme Audit institutions should also be looking to develop their quality management systems and make sure that they're compliant within the new and revised International Standard 140 on quality management. And we should look at the Parliament should be engaging more effectively with the sides to ensure that they use the reports of the Supreme Audit institutions to enhance government accountability and effectively scrutinise the use of public resources by their respective institutions. So I've whistled through PFM quite quickly, given the time situation. I'll hand over to Marianne for the public procurement section. You're muted.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, so thank you, Alistair, for your presentation, and just for me, a few comments about the public procurement section of our assessment report. First of all, I'm happy to report that in case of public procurement, we did see some positive, significant developments since the last assessment. First of all, adoption of a comprehensive set of amendments to the public procurement law in 2020 that significantly increased transparency of the process and brought the legal framework closer to the EU standards. Secondly, in the beginning of 2024, adoption after a long discussion, public consultation, a new public procurement strategy for the next 4 years. And SIGMA was especially happy about the very inclusive process of discussion and preparation of this document that involved all key stakeholders, including the end users and civil society organizations. Then a constant development of the public procurement portal, so a web-based electronic procurement system. And recently, adoption of new regulations on centralized procurement. So again, those are 4 very important positive developments. And again, some of them required a lot of preparation and were finalized with a great success. So next slide, please. But when we are when we are discussing the, let's say, general situation in the public procurement system, we still do see quite a lot of significant issues, problems. So starting from the legal framework, the legislation for classical procurement, so for procurement awarded by public institutions and utilities, and it is in the utilities sector, the legal situation looks pretty decent in the sense that the law still requires some improvements, but it's already quite well harmonized with the EU directives. However, when it comes to the second part of this negotiation chapter with the EU, public-private partnerships and concessions, in this here the situation is really not good. First, the legal framework is completely fragmented, meaning that we have separate regulations in the entities and in the federation, even at the cantonal level. Secondly, many of those regulations are not aligned even with the basic principles of the EU concessions and private partnership systems. When it comes to the institutional setup, again, a bit similar picture. We have a solid institutional system for classical procurement. I mean, both the public procurement agency with its headquarters in Sarajevo and branch offices in Banja Luka and Mostar. It's a pretty strong, mature institution, well respected by the stakeholders. Also, the Public Procurement Review Body has significantly improved its quality and timeliness of its work. So the classical procurement, again, has strong institutional foundations, but then again, in the area of public-private partnerships and concessions, the same story, high level of fragmentation and not really efficient institutions. When it comes to procurement practice, we, based on the statistical data that we collected, that we received from the authorities. So first of all, we do see that the public procurement practice is still quite bureaucratic and formalistic. Little attention is being paid to the efficiency of the system, and we can see this. Can we see the next slide, please? And we can see the efficiency of the public procurement operations, which is not improving, which is not good already, and which is not really improving. So we can see, for example, two indicators here. First is that number of procedures when only one tenderer did participate and did submit its tender, which is in Bosnia and Herzegovina very high. It's up to 50% of all procedures, and with only one competitor interested in this tender, which is much higher than in the EU. But unfortunately, it's a common problem to many countries in the region. So Bosnia is not the only country that struggles with competition. And the other indicator that measures also the level of competition, that shows that the average number of tenders submitted, again, is much lower in Bosnia and Herzegovina than in the EU. And it's also not improving, on the contrary, it's somehow decreasing. So we do have a serious problem with the next slide, please, with the implementation, with the quality of procurement practice, with the efficiency. There's another chart that shows an interesting feature of the public procurement system. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, we do see the number of appeals submitted to the procurement review body in Bosnia compared to other institutions in the region. And we do see that in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the number of appeals is much, much higher. It's like 3-4 times higher than in other countries in the region. And it's a good sign that the procurement review body in Bosnia and Herzegovina, despite this heavy workload, is managing well the complaints that were received. Yes. So again, the same distribution of criteria and the same picture as in other sectors. So we do have, in case of public procurement, pretty good legislation. So the legislative framework is assessed as quite good, as quite well aligned with the SIGMA principles, with the EU standards. We have good institutional setup, but again, results do not meet the expectations. Implementation is still lagging behind. And finally, the recommendations, so the way forward. So we discuss the need for developing a harmonized legal framework for public-private partnerships and concessions. We are fully aware of the constitutional limitations and on the constitutional constraints, but nevertheless, the EU negotiation process requires Bosnia and Herzegovina to align with its legislation, also its legislation in the area of public procurement, including public-private partnerships and concessions, to align with the EU standards. Secondly, to also further amend, improve public procurement law, to further align it with the EU, but also to fully integrate the electronic procurement tools. And then regarding the institutional setup, we do praise the maturity of the public procurement institutions in Bosnia and Herzegovina. However, we also would like to bring your attention to the need of better coordination and better harmonization of interpretations, because quite often the users, the stakeholders, complain about receiving, again, different opinions from the central institutions. And then we do, again, having noted the low level of competition, among one of the remedies, one of the tools to improve the competition, we suggest to focus more on training and to provide better advice and consultancy to support to contracting authorities and also to business to improve the quality of tender documents. And again, to somehow modernize the procurement approach to focus more on the quality aspect of the tender document, of the tender processes and contract award criteria. But again, many of those issues, many of those procurement problems somehow are common to the whole region, and we very often, like the problem of low level of competition or focus on the price, on the criteria, are shared with other countries in the region. But nevertheless, once again, in the area of public procurement, we do see a lot of significant, important, positive developments. So that's it, what we can stop sharing. That's all that we have prepared for today, our presentations. Again, it was a very, very quick overview of our key recommendations and of our key findings. Once again, you can now find the full text of the final report published on SIGMA website. And once again, we hope, and we are already working with you on several of those issues that we have identified as areas for improvement. We continue providing our assistance, and we will provide our assistance. So that's it from our side. If you do have any questions or comments, being to the last part of the presentation, or maybe also to the general workshop, now is the time. Yes, please, Amela.
Zahvaljujem se, pozdravljam prisutne I zahvaljujem se na prezentaciji.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. My name is Amela Mulahalilović. I am from SAI Federation.
Zamolila bih samo za jedan komentar vezano za eksternu reviziju.
A comment about external audit. The indicator that refers to parliaments using the SAI reports. The assemblies of the cantons have started the practice to consider audit reports, city and municipal councils as well. Is there a way to take into account that consideration when you're assessing this criteria? So, very important entities in relation to our office are them. So city, municipal level, cantonal level assemblies. So would that be possible?
Thank you, Amela. And I commend that good practice that's been happening at the local and municipal level. But we are looking at this from what we classify as central government level, I suppose, rather than the overall general government. So the assessment is just done on the central government, so the Federation Parliament, and their use of the size reports in that regard. So that is the same. That's the consistent approach we have across all countries. So I commend the municipalities, the cantons, for doing this. It's good practice, and you would see this in many regional audit offices in other countries as well. But it's not part of our system, which we look at the central government and the overall parliamentary scrutiny.
Thank you for your answer.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. I don't think I see any other hands raised, which means that okay, I think we can close the workshop. So I'd like to thank you very much. I'd like to thank our speakers for the presentations, and I would like to ask, thank you for your patience, for your time. And once again, thank you very much for the excellent cooperation that we had last year in all the institutions that somehow made our work possible and easier, and that led eventually to our successful finalizing and publishing of the reports, which we hope, as Peter said at the beginning, will continue to be helpful, both for you, also for other stakeholders, not just for the governments, but also to inspire civil society and other stakeholders, and also to be used by the European Commission services in their work, in the negotiations, and in their programming of the technical assistance. And once again, we will stay with you and we will continue working with you. Thank you so much. And also, thank you very much, the interpreters that made this meeting possible. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Vidimo se.